The evening was unusually cold, the kind that seeps deep into your bones even when you're bundled in layers. A pale fog drifted lazily through the deserted street, swallowing up street lamps and muffling every sound. Officer Ryan adjusted his grip on Rex's leash as they walked their usual patrol route. Rex, his loyal canine partner, had been unusually restless all evening, his ears twitching at distant sounds, his nose lifting as though chasing something only he could sense. Ryan had worked with Rex for 4 years and had learned one thing above all else. If Rex was acting strange, it meant trouble was close. The two of them had seen things together that most officers never encountered: drug busts, missing person rescues, and even violent standoffs. But tonight, something felt different. The last 2 weeks had been a nightmare for the small town of Hollow Creek. 23 children had gone missing without a trace. Posters lined telephone poles, parents cried on camera, and every law enforcement agency in the region had been pulled into the search. But there were no leads, no footprints, no ransom notes, no signs of forced entry. It was as if the children had vanished into thin air. Ryan hated missing children cases more than anything else. Every day that passed lowered the chances of bringing them back alive. Tonight's patrol was supposed to be routine, but Ryan had this gnawing feeling that something was about to change. Rex suddenly stopped dead in his tracks, his muscles tightening beneath his sleek black fur. His ears shot forward and a low, guttural growl rumbled in his throat. Ryan looked down at him immediately, alert. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, scanning the quiet street. Rex's gaze was locked on a decrepit house at the far end of the block, a place Ryan had passed a dozen times without a second thought. Its paint was chipped, the windows boarded up, and weeds grew wildly in the cracked driveway. It was the kind of house kids dared each other to spend the night in, but never actually did. But Rex's growl deepened as he took a cautious step forward, his body tense and his tail rigid like a spear. Ryan called in on his radio. "Unit 7 to dispatch, possible lead on Hollow Creek disappearances. I'm at 413 Willow Lane, requesting backup." The reply crackled in his earpiece. "Copy that, Unit 7. Back up en route." Within minutes, 2 more patrol cars rolled up, their headlights slicing through the fog. Officers Miller and Sanchez stepped out, weapons holstered but hands ready. "What's going on?" Miller asked. "Rex caught a scent," Ryan explained, his voice low and serious. "He's locked on this house." Sanchez frowned, glancing at the rotting structure. "Place has been abandoned for years. Doesn't even have power." "Tell that to Rex," Ryan replied grimly, watching as the dog's hackles rose. Suddenly, Rex lunged forward, jerking the leash from Ryan's grip. "Rex!" Ryan barked, chasing after him as the canine sprinted straight to the rusted front gate. He stopped just short of it, planting his paws firmly on the ground, and began barking wildly, his deep, sharp barks echoing through the night. The sound made the other officers uneasy. Rex wasn't barking like he'd found drugs or a body. This was different. Desperate, urgent, primal. "All right," Ryan muttered, pulling out his flashlight. "We're going in." The creaking gate gave way with a metallic groan as the team stepped onto the cracked stone path leading to the house. The closer they got, the heavier the air felt, as if the fog itself had grown thicker around the place. Ryan's heart thudded in his chest, his senses on high alert. He had been in dangerous situations before, but there was something about this place that made every instinct scream to turn back. The front door was slightly ajar, swaying gently with each cold gust of wind. Rex nosed it open and stepped inside. First, his nails clicking softly against the warped wooden floorboards. Ryan followed, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Dust floated in the air like tiny silver motes, and the faint smell of mildew hung thick. But beneath it, Ryan caught another scent. Faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. Fear. The house was silent except for the creaks of settling wood. Old furniture lay draped in yellowed sheets, picture frames hung crooked on the walls, and shattered glass glittered in the corners. Every step they took seemed louder than it should have been, like the house was holding its breath. "Check the back rooms," Ryan ordered softly. Miller nodded and disappeared down the left hallway, Sanchez taking the right. Ryan followed Rex deeper inside, the dog moving cautiously but with purpose, nose twitching, ears perked. Suddenly, Rex stopped again, his entire body rigid. He turned his head slowly toward a narrow, dark doorway at the end of the hall. A door half hidden behind an old armoire, as if someone had tried to conceal it. Ryan moved the armoire aside, revealing the door completely. It was old, splintered, and stained, with deep scratches along the frame. Ryan tried the handle. Locked. Rex let out a sharp bark, scratching at the door, his claws clicking against the wood. Ryan's radio buzzed. "Ryan," Miller's voice came through, tense and urgent. "You need to get to the basement, now." Ryan's grip on his flashlight tightened. Basement. There wasn't supposed to be one. "Stay sharp," he muttered to Rex, lowering his voice to barely a whisper, and just as he turned, faintly, from somewhere beneath the floorboards, came the softest sound imaginable. A whimper. Ryan froze. His breath caught in his throat and goosebumps prickled his arms. Rex's ears shot up, and the dog growled deep in his chest, his entire body trembling with contained energy. Ryan knelt beside him, placing a hand gently on his back. "You hear that too, boy?" he whispered. Another whimper, then a muffled sob. It was coming from beneath them. Ryan exchanged a glance with Sanchez, who had reappeared, pale and wide-eyed. Without a word, they followed Rex as he pulled them toward a set of rotting wooden stairs leading down into darkness. Each step creaked under their weight, threatening to give way, and the cold, damp air grew thicker with every descent. The faint cries grew louder, clearer, sending chills down Ryan's spine. He knew, deep down, that whatever they were about to find was going to change everything, but he had no idea how terrifying the truth would be. The basement stairs groaned under Officer Ryan's boots as he descended carefully into the pitch-black void below, every step echoing faintly like distant thunder. Rex moved ahead, his claws scraping against the damp wood, his body low and tense. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, the kind of cold that clings to your lungs and makes each breath feel heavy. Ryan could taste dust and rust on his tongue. Behind him, Officer Sanchez followed closely, his flashlight beam jittering slightly from his unsteady hands. The faint cries they had heard above were louder now, clearer but still muffled, like voices trapped behind walls. Ryan slowed his breathing, straining to listen. There was no mistaking it now. Somewhere in this house, someone was alive. The basement floor was concrete, cracked and damp, littered with broken glass, scraps of wood, and a few rusted tools. The smell down here was stronger, mold mixed with something sour, metallic, and unpleasant. Rex stopped suddenly near the far wall, his nose pressed against the cold stone, sniffing frantically. He pawed at the ground and let out a sharp bark, spinning around to face Ryan, his amber eyes glowing faintly in the flashlight's beam. "You've got something, don't you, boy?" Ryan whispered, kneeling beside him. He ran his hand along the wall, tapping lightly. "Hollow." "Ryan," Sanchez muttered uneasily. "This doesn't feel right. We should wait for backup." Ryan shook his head. "If there are people down here, we don't have time to wait." He grabbed an old crowbar leaning against a shelf and jammed it into the seams of the wall. With a grunt, he pried, and suddenly, a section of the wall gave way, revealing a narrow passage hidden behind the stone facade. Cold air whooshed out like the breath of some ancient beast. Rex immediately bounded inside, barking once, sharply, like a command to follow. The passage was claustrophobic, barely wide enough for one person at a time, and lined with rotting wooden beams that looked ready to collapse. They walked single file, Sanchez muttering prayers under his breath, while Ryan's flashlight cut shaky circles into the darkness ahead. "Where the hell does this even go?" Sanchez whispered. Ryan didn't answer, but his gut twisted with unease. It didn't make sense. This house wasn't on any city planning records. How could there be tunnels here, and who had built them? They turned a corner, and that's when Ryan saw it. A heavy metal door, bolted shut with chains, sitting at the end of the passage. Rex scratched furiously at the base of the door, barking so loudly it made Ryan's ears ring. Behind it, the muffled cries were unmistakable now. Children. Dear God, Sanchez whispered, his voice cracking. Ryan motioned for him to step back, then drew his weapon. Stand clear. With one swift motion, he kicked at the chain lock. It rattled violently but didn't break. He kicked again, harder this time, until the chain finally snapped with a loud clang that echoed through the tunnels. He shoved the door open, flashlight raised, and what lay beyond froze him where he stood. A cramped underground room, barely lit by a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling, was packed with 23 children, huddled together on dirty blankets. Their faces were pale and gaunt, their eyes hollow from fear and exhaustion. Some clutched each other, some whimpered softly, and a few just stared blankly at the intruders, too numb to react. Ryan lowered his weapon immediately, his chest tightening. It's okay, he whispered softly, trying to keep his voice steady. You're safe now. We're here to help you. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, crawled forward on trembling hands and knees, her voice barely audible. Please, don't let them come back. Ryan crouched to her level, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. Who? Who did this? Before she could answer, Rex suddenly growled, his ears flicking toward the far wall of the room. Ryan followed, his gaze, and noticed something strange. A second door, smaller, built almost seamlessly into the wall. It was covered in fresh scratch marks and reinforced with a steel bar. Ryan's stomach dropped. There was more. He approached cautiously, pressing his ear to the cold metal. At first, there was nothing. Then, faintly, he heard something dragging. Slow, deliberate, heavy. He stepped back immediately, motioning for Sanchez to gather the children near the exit. We've got another room, Ryan said quietly, and whatever's in there isn't supposed to be. Before they could react, a sudden loud clang echoed from behind the steel door, so powerful it rattled the walls. Several children screamed, clinging to each other in terror. Rex barked furiously, lunging toward the sound, his leash straining in Ryan's grip. And then, just as suddenly, everything went silent. Dispatch, this is Unit 7, Ryan said urgently into his radio, his voice tight. We've got 23 confirmed missing minors alive at 413 Willow Lane, requesting immediate medical assistance and additional units. There's something else down here. Copy that, Unit 7, dispatch responded. Help is on the way. But Ryan wasn't reassured. Every instinct screamed at him that they weren't alone. As they began leading the children one by one toward the narrow passage, the air behind the steel door grew colder, as though something massive had stirred awake. The faint sound of dripping water echoed through the tunnels, mixing with the shallow sobs of frightened kids and the panting of Rex, who refused to stop growling. Ryan turned to Sanchez. Get them out, now, don't wait for me. Sanchez hesitated, his wide eyes filled with fear, but one look at Ryan's face told him there was no room for argument. He nodded quickly, guiding the children into the tunnel. Ryan and Rex stayed behind, both frozen in place, listening. Then, from beyond the steel door, came a low, guttural whisper. It wasn't English. It wasn't any language Ryan could recognize. But the intent was clear, a warning, or a threat. Rex let out a snarl so deep it vibrated in Ryan's bones. Something was hiding behind that door, something that wasn't supposed to exist. And Ryan realized, with a sinking dread, that rescuing these children was only the beginning. Ryan's heartbeat pounded in his ears as he stood frozen in front of the steel door, the cold air pressing against his skin like ice. Rex was beside him, hackles raised, teeth bared, a low rumble vibrating deep in his chest. The other officers had already led the rescued children toward the surface, their soft sobs and frightened whispers fading slowly up the narrow passage. Down here, in the dim light of the single flickering bulb, Ryan felt as though the rest of the world had disappeared. It was just him, Rex, and whatever was on the other side of that door. The silence was suffocating. Then, faintly, there it was again, a slow, deliberate dragging sound, like heavy chains scraping against concrete. Ryan's grip tightened on his weapon as sweat beaded along his forehead despite the chill. He took one step closer, pressing, his ear against the cold steel, trying to make sense of the muffled noises. That's when he heard it. Breathing. Deep, heavy, labored breathing. And underneath it, something else. A whisper. Faint, garbled, and in a language he didn't recognize, but there was intent behind it, a rhythm that made his skin crawl. Ryan swallowed hard and clicked his radio. Unit 7 to dispatch, he whispered, barely moving his lips. Possible additional suspects still on site, requesting full tactical backup now. Copy that, Unit 7, dispatch crackled back. SWAT en route, ETA, 7 minutes. 7 minutes. Ryan glanced at Rex, who was pacing anxiously, pulling against the leash like he wanted to tear through the door. 7 minutes suddenly felt like a lifetime. He should have waited. He should have left with the others. But something in his gut told him that if he walked away now, whatever was inside this basement would vanish before anyone else came back. And Ryan wasn't about to let that happen. He slid the safety off his weapon, took a deep breath, and carefully examined the chains across the steel door. Someone had reinforced them from the outside, as though keeping something in, not out. The thick links had fresh scratches along the edges like something, or someone, had tried clawing its way free. Rex stopped pacing and sat suddenly, his entire body rigid, ears perked, staring unblinking at the door. Then, without warning, the dragging noise stopped. Silence. Ryan raised his weapon slowly, every muscle in his body coiled tight. And then it happened. The door slammed against its hinges with a violent force, making the chains rattle like bones. Ryan stumbled back, nearly losing his footing as Rex barked wildly, lunging forward. The sound was deafening in the cramped tunnel. Something was trying to get out. "Stay!" Ryan ordered, holding Rex back with all his strength. From behind, the door came a sound Ryan would never forget for the rest of his life. A deep, guttural growl, far too low and inhuman to belong to anything ordinary. He felt it more than he heard it, vibrating through the concrete floor beneath his boots. His mind screamed to run, but his training rooted him in place. Suddenly, a loud metallic snap echoed through the chamber. One of the chains had broken. Ryan cursed under his breath, pulling Rex closer. The growling grew louder now, followed by another chain snapping and another. He aimed his flashlight at the door just as the last link fell loose. The door creaked open an inch, and then two piercing eyes reflected in the beam, not human, but cold, glassy, and feral. Before Ryan could react, Rex lunged forward, slipping, free of his grip, throwing himself at the door with all his strength. The heavy steel slammed open, crashing against the wall. And that's when Ryan saw it. Inside the hidden chamber was a sprawling network of underground tunnels, stretching far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The walls were lined with crude, wooden supports, old lanterns, and strange markings carved deep into the stone. Symbols Ryan didn't recognize but somehow felt wrong just looking at them. And there, in the center of the room, chained to the floor, was a man. Or what used to be one. His clothes were torn and filthy, his hair long and matted, his body covered in bruises and scars. His wrists were bound with heavy cuffs, and yet, there was something unnatural about the way he moved. His head tilted, unnaturally far, his limbs twitching in jagged, uneven motions. He snarled at Ryan, teeth bared, and lunged forward, but the chain snapped him back violently. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. What the hell? Then he noticed the marks on the floor, dozens of them. Tiny scratches, handprints, drag marks. He shined his flashlight around, and his stomach dropped. Small shoes, children's shoes, everywhere. Ryan's blood went cold as realization hit him. Whoever this man was, he hadn't been working alone. This was no ordinary missing children case. This was part of something much bigger, something far darker. Suddenly the man's lips moved, and he began muttering in that strange, garbled language again. The symbols on the walls seemed almost to hum in response. Rex barked furiously, his entire body vibrating with tension, his teeth snapping as he lunged against the leash. Ryan took a careful step back. "Dispatch," he whispered hoarsely into his radio. We've got an unidentified suspect in custody. Send hazmat forensic and every damn specialist you've got. This isn't normal." Before dispatch could respond, the man let out an ear-splitting scream, thrashing violently against his chains. Something inhuman echoed in that scream, reverberating through the tunnels. Dust fell from the ceiling, and distant crashes echoed deeper underground, as though the entire network was reacting to his rage. Ryan backed toward the door, Rex at his side, never taking his eyes off the chained figure. But then, just as he reached the threshold, a sound drifted from deeper in the tunnels, a sound that froze him in place. Footsteps, dozens of them, slow, heavy, in unison. Rex turned his head toward the darkness, ears pinned back, letting out a sharp, nervous whine. Ryan raised his weapon again, his flashlight shaking slightly as he aimed it into the depths of the tunnels. For just a moment the beam caught movement, shadows shifting, retreating quickly out of sight. And then, silence again. Ryan knew one thing for certain now. Whoever had built these tunnels wasn't gone. And they knew he was here. He took a deep breath and looked at Rex. "We're not done yet, boy." Rex growled softly in agreement, his amber eyes locked on the darkness. Ahead, backup couldn't come fast enough. But deep down, Ryan had the sinking feeling that even with an entire SWAT team, they might already be too late.